Well, hello, Andrew here again, and this is 178 of our series of episodes in the Gospel of Matthew. And today we're continuing in Matthew 24 as Jesus is talking to his disciples, about the end of all things. And so we pick it up in verse 32. Hear the words of Jesus. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. There's a sense of certainty and finality in the words here of Jesus. As I said, as we started into this section, there's hardly been a time in the history of the church over the past 2,000 years when Christians didn't believe that they were living in the end times, in the last days, and that the return of Jesus coming in his glory was imminent. In the fig tree analogy, Jesus is telling us that when the signs have been fulfilled, we can be confident that the end, that the return is near. This is actually a picture of hope. And the reason I suggest that is because as we've read the signs, we see that before his return, it gets very dark. And he's saying, when these signs have all been fulfilled, the time is near. A picture of hope. I was reading E. Stanley Jones this morning, and he talks about hope. And I just want to share with you what he says in the section I was reading today. Hope is a Christian virtue, but not a non-Christian virtue. It was looked on as an illusion. The non-Christian position is, life will keep the word of promise to your ear and break it to your hope. The Christian position is, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. Romans 15 and 13. Abound in hope. That is the picture of a Christian. We never know when we are defeated, for we begin with defeat, the defeat of the cross. You cannot defeat defeat, for the Christian turns the defeat of the cross into the victory of Easter morning. We see a sunrise in every sunset, an oak tree in every decaying seed. We see a saint in every Magdalene, a rock in every wobbly Simon, a new beginning in every sad ending. Isn't that great? Thank you, Eli Stanley Jones. That's great. He's right. And if we look seriously at the signs that Jesus is referring to, as I said a minute ago, they are very dark, very dark. Jesus assures us that they will pass. Many of us experience this. I was praying with a friend a few days back, and he shared that he was experiencing a time of depression and that this was not unfamiliar to him, that he'd been through these times before. This one, he didn't know the reason, and usually he did. Yet as I prayed with him, as I prayed for him, I was aware from my own experience the power of hope. He'd been here before, and he knew that it had passed. He could also draw confidence that this too would pass. And that's how I prayed. I prayed with that sense of, Lord, that there would just be this quiet, deep knowing that this too will pass. Because it's been my experience also. It will pass. A new day awaits. Jesus reframes the whole of the awful experience of the prelude to his return as a cause for hope. Hope that will be realized. There's a sense that he's saying, the worse it gets, the more sure you can be that the time is near. I'm coming soon. My own experience is that this is true. Not so much of his physical presence, but experientially. And sensing the presence of Jesus, it's often been most real following times of real darkness, of deep trial, times of real pressure, of that horrible pressing anxiety. In fact, as I look back, it's been into and following my worst moments that Jesus has ultimately injected himself. We can draw comfort from this. It's that old Tony Campolo expression, it may be Friday, but Sunday's coming. And Jesus assures us that the eschatological reality is that when it starts happening, it will be unstoppable. There won't be a darkness with no light following. There won't be the awfulness with no redemption. There won't be the great catastrophe without deliverance and redemption. No matter how dark it gets, and it's darkest just before the dawn, just as the earth is turning before the sun, light will follow. No matter how desperate things appear, deliverance is already on its way. And I want to emphasize that. It's already on its way. We see two great examples of that in the prophet Daniel. First in chapter 9, Daniel says this in verse 20. While I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and making my request to the Lord my God for his holy hill, because he's in Babylon or he's in Assyria somewhere, and he's praying for Jerusalem, hundreds of miles away. While I was still in prayer, Gabriel, sound familiar? He appears in Matthew's Gospel. He's the one who appears to Mary. Gabriel, the man I had seen in the earlier vision, came to me in swift flight about the time of the evening sacrifice. He instructed me and said to me, Daniel, I've now come to give you insight and understanding. As soon as you began to pray, an answer was given, which I have come to tell you, for you are highly esteemed. Hear that? As soon as you began to pray, an answer was given. And Daniel had said, while I was still in prayer, Gabriel came. It's a great principle. I go regularly for spiritual direction. And my spiritual director, Kevin, he's a wonderful man. And when I'd have a particular problem, he'd often ask me the question, I'm sure I've said this before, and what happened, Andrew, when you brought this matter before the Lord in prayer? And in the early days, I'd often say, well, until there's a moment, I hadn't considered that something as an option that might work. And he said, well, why don't we do it just now? Let's be quiet, and you bring the matter before the Lord in prayer. And the thing is that there was nearly always an answer, and it was immediate. And it's one of the things I've observed when I say to people, if you ask the Lord for an answer, notice the first thing that comes to mind. Notice the first thing. Because generally, often, usually, certainly in my experience, it's the one we need to take notice of. So often we dismiss it and think, no, that couldn't be right. And we need to sit with it and think, oh, there's something here for us. There's something here for us. As soon as you began to pray, an answer was given, for which I've come to tell you, for you are highly esteemed. It's a great principle. But I want you to listen to the second one. This is actually really opposite to the passage that we're looking at. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a revelation was given to Daniel, who was called Belteshazzar. Its message was true, and it concerned a great war. The understanding of the message came to him in a vision. At that time, I, Daniel, mourned for 3 weeks. I ate no choice food, no meat or wine touched my lips, and I used no lotion at all times until the 3 weeks were over. On the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, I looked up, and there before me was a man dressed in linen, with a belt of the finest gold around his waist. His body was like chrysolite. His face was like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and his voice like the sound of a multitude. Does it sound familiar? Or perhaps it should do. Check Revelation chapter 1 verses 12 to 18 and I think you'll get a sense of who this person might be. I, Daniel, was the only one who saw the vision. The men with me did not see it, but such terror overwhelmed them that they fled and hid themselves. So I was left alone, gazing at this great vision. The men with me, I had no strength left. My face turned deathly pale, and I was helpless. Then I heard him speaking, and as I listened, I fell into a deep sleep, my face to the ground. A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you. And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling. Then he continued, do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerning a time yet to come. Wow. The answer was immediate, yet it took 3 weeks to arrive. And as we read, you can look at it again, read that passage, Daniel chapter 10, verses 1 through to, where was I there? Verse 14. These were times of deep darkness for Daniel, yet help was already on its way. Already on its way. Here again the words of verse 34 in the text that we've started with and are looking at today. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Hope is secure. Light will follow darkness, and even as it gets darker, Jesus is already on his way. And Jesus gives us the basis for extra confidence in the final words of our passage today. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. You can bank on it. He's coming back. And when things seem the darkest and the most bleak, hang on to hope, because it's not far away. God bless you.